And so now let's talk about Americans' character. And Americans, as we already mentioned, are very polite. Um, is it true?
Yes. Once again, America is a very large country, so if you're in, let's say, New York, people may be less polite than if you were in the southern part of the country. So there are differences, but by and large, yes, we are a culture that is very concerned with being polite. So always making the right social gestures and things like that.
And sometimes it seems that there are such situations when you say thank you, excuse me, sorry, when they are not necessary. Why is it so?
It's very true. I mean, we apologize again and again, even when things may not be our fault. And we say thank you again and again, thank you very much for things that, may be very small. I really could not explain it to you. It's just, it's certainly a part of our culture. You don't want to be perceived as rude in American culture. That's a very bad thing to be. So by always apologizing and always, thanking people, we can assure that we will not be perceived as rude.
So not to seem rude, you always say thank you and excuse me. And is there a difference between excuse me and sorry? Because some think that they are the same. Could you tell us if there is a difference or not?
Yeah, I would say excuse me is kind of it's less. So if I wanted to, if I was in the metro, right, if I was in the subway and it was very crowded and I was bumping into people, I could say, oh, excuse me, to scoot past. Or if I was in a conference and I wanted to make a point and politely interject, I could say, oh, excuse me, and enter. Sorry is much more like begging forgiveness. So if I had done something wrong to you, if I had, accidentally interrupted you, I could say, oh, I'm sorry. But I will say it's much better to use sorry always instead of using excuse me at a time that it may not be appropriate.
I see. Sorry will be all right in the first situation you described and in the second also. And there is again a question, when should we use beg? I beg your pardon.
You could use it for the first example when you're excusing yourself, or if you didn't hear something the first time and you could say, oh, I beg your pardon, and then it would be repeated to you. But I think it's kind of a British phrase, but we use it in America when we want to hear something again. So if I misheard you, I could say, I beg your pardon, and you would be able to speak.
And you can say, excuse me, could you repeat, please, also is possible. I see. And is it true that American English is more expressive than British English?
I know that we like to use very strong words. So if I ate my friend's cooking, I would say, oh, it was delicious. It was amazing, Or if my friend wasn't around, I could say, it was awful. It was terrible. And British English might be a little more, it was tasty. It was good. So oftentimes we'll use very strong words like that.
Okay, you're very emotional, and British English is more, I don't know, Britons are more reserved, maybe they don't use such strong words because of this, because of culture. Thank you. And so, as we just said, Americans are very polite and emotional, and when you are in America, you should say thanks and excuse me. almost always. Okay, it's a joke. When it is appropriate, of course. And there is a difference between excuse me and sorry. When you are going to do something, for example, ask something or ask to repeat or something else, you should say excuse me. But when you feel sorry for something you have already done, it is better to say sorry. And there are a lot of expressive words such as exactly, terrible, amazing, and so on. And again, there is a question. Американский язык, есть еще выражения американские, но не из английского языка. And the question is, I will translate it to you. Are there any American expressions, but not from English language? Not from British English, I'm sorry.
So maybe words that we take from another language other than English?
Yes. Maybe I beg your pardon. Pardon is not, I think, British. No.
I think pardon is an English word. We would say, you can say bravo or brava, right, at the end of a show. If you're at the theater, things like that. That's a word that's used. And I can't think of any off the top of my head, but a lot of French words have found their way into English. English is a language that takes a lot from other cultures. I can't think of any at the moment, but it's not unheard of. I would say you're better off using English words when possible, though.
And you've said bravo, yes? And I saw some film. I saw the film and one in English, and a woman always used this word and always said bravo. And now I understand you. And it seemed to me strange because I understood that it is not from British English. Yes. No, and do you hear me now? Because
Yes, I can hear you.
Because there was some problem, I think, with the picture I see with your picture. Okay, let's continue then. And now I would like to discuss differences in language in British and American English. Are there any differences?
Yes, I think there are certain grammatical differences and certain spelling differences that might occur, as well as there are some words that they have different than us for the same thing. For instance, they might call elevators in America.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I will help you. I'll show you the table so that you can use and give us some examples.
Yes, absolutely. Petrol is the first one that comes to mind. Over here, we would call it gas or gasoline. Petrol is never used in the United States. Biscuit and cookie is a good one because you might order one thing at a restaurant and receive something very different. And most of these, though, if you were to use, for instance, flat in America, it would be understood as an apartment. Same thing with holiday and vacation. It would be understood in America most of the time. So while it might be confusing at first, a lot of these words aren't completely foreign to Americans.
And so if I say British variants, do Americans understand me well, or they will think sometime and only then will answer, or...
They might ask for an explanation. For instance, if you asked where the chemist was, I think most people would be very confused by that. Drugstore or pharmacy is just what it's called in America. But other examples, such as a bill and a check, those would be understood. You could use those.
Okay, and could you comment on some other examples? For example, I'm interested. In spelling at first, we see that there is difference, and so if we write these words using the British variant, will it be a mistake?
Yes, the one that jumps out to me the most is the way that the British spell color and labor. The O-U-R is very British. Americans would be able to read it, surely, but they would know that it was the British spelling. The same thing with realize. They use an S and we use a Z. So it would be a British spelling, but Americans would still know the word.
I see. And as for prepositions, we in America only can say on the street and on weekends. We can't say in the street at weekends.
Yeah, if in American English, if you said in the street, you would literally be standing in the middle of the street where the cars drive. So on the street would be on the sidewalks, or a store would be located on that street. Same thing with at weekends. I've never actually heard someone say at weekends in America, so that would be very strange.
Okay, I see.
The last example, write to me and write me, you could use either of those in the United States.
Okay, I see. And there are two questions from Margarita. And her question is, how often do Americans use tense? I think she means, do you use all the tenses? Because at school we study 16 tenses, and do you use all of them or just basic tenses? What can you say?
Well, I can tell you that most Americans, most all Americans I know, probably could not list all of the tenses to you if you were to ask them. I mean, we don't know. It's very strange because we know what sounds right. I'm sure you all understand that in Russian language. You know what sounds right, even if you may not know why. And so we will use them subconsciously, but I don't know the difference between I did, I have done, I would have done, I would have did. I mean, we use all of them, yes, but we may not be able to identify which tense we are using.
I see. But still you use a lot of tenses, not only three tenses: future, past, and present. But
yeah, we use many.
I see. And there are more questions. Could you read them and answer?
I misunderstand the first one about checkers and drafts. I'm not sure I understand that, but in the meantime, I'll answer the second one. Americans and British, we certainly understand each other plenty. It's we speak the same language minus these subtle differences, but almost always we will completely understand each other. And ought not to do anything, yeah, that's certainly a British way of saying it, but once again, it would be understood. We Americans might say, while the British say, you ought not do that if something is not allowed or prohibited, we would say you shouldn't or you're not supposed to do that. That would, I think, would be the biggest difference there.
I see. And there are more examples concerning grammar, and in the first sentence we can see the use of present perfect in British English. We have just done it, and in American we just did it. So you can't say we have just done it.
Yeah, it would certainly be understood, and we might say that depending on the context, but yes, I think it would be much more common to say we just did it. And especially with the second example, I've not seen them. That's a very British way to say that, I think.
And the second sentence is almost the same. I haven't seen them and I didn't see them.
Yes.
Okay, and you don't use the expression has got. You say he has a big family. Only the verb has.
I think you could use either. It depends on what part of America you're in. Because, for instance, the people in the northern part of the country speak in a different dialect than those in the south, so there might be differences. But I have heard both examples in America.
I see. Thank you. So when you are in America, you should remember these differences, or in most situations you will be understood, but still it is better to use the vocabulary and grammar, spelling, and yes, prepositions which are appropriate for American English.